So think of an ideal that you've held for yourself in your life. Maybe it's been working for a certain company with a certain salary. Maybe it's been playing as an athlete on a certain team. Maybe it's been getting a certain grade on a test, or exam, or a class. Maybe it's trying to get to bed, at a certain hour, despite the long list of things that just seems, unimaginable to get done. Everyone has ideals for their life, within their life. And ideals are a good thing. It's part of what makes us human beings, that we don't want mediocrity, but we strive for greatness at different times. I think the difference between existing and living is those who live exist with purpose. And purpose can come from living for ideals. And we all desire purpose and meaning for our lives. But the thing about ideals is that they're difficult. It's hard to achieve the fullness that we want at different times in different areas. Ideals require a lot of us, strength and flexibility. And just because, an ideal is kind of hard to fulfill at different times, doesn't mean they should be dismissed or abandoned. That's what a business person, an athlete, a parent, a student would say when it comes to ideals. Those who move on and abandon ideals can find them living quickly without purpose. Well, God has created all of us and has given us ideals to live, 10 Commandments, etc. And these ideals are not apart from us or separate from us. But we hear today that they're written into who we are, into our humanity, and into our Christianity. The readings this weekend talk about us being created out of love and being created for love. And this love is not an easy thing. So all that being said, I think this weekend, God wants to speak this through our Gospels, through our readings. That being a disciple of Jesus means being one who doesn't abandon the ideal. In the Gospel, the Pharisees are questioning Jesus about divorce. At this time in the culture, it's widely accepted. Even the disciples are kind of questioning and asking him about it. And in his answer, he doesn't use the law to defend his position. Obviously, they had heard him speak about this before. That's why they were asking him. And in his answer, he goes back to Genesis, the first book of the Bible, which is a foundational text to understand our origin as human beings and the meaning of our lives. So in other words, in Jesus' answer, he doesn't just double down, but he kind of brings out the big guns, for his answer. That in his time, in an age where the ideal was questioned, the permanence of marriage, that Jesus didn't want to abandon the ideal, but he wanted to call them back to it and invite them to see its goodness. And what does Jesus end up pointing to really that is at issue? Well, just the general difference of opinion, of men and women. Well, no, he says because of their hardness of heart, Moses allowed divorce. This hardness, the word that's used here in the Greek, means it's related to the word sclerosis. So this hardening, that as we live for ourselves in life, we can become hardened and numbed to others. But rather than being closed, openness and vulnerability is what Jesus is calling for. Sacrifice. Sacrifice that he lived himself on the cross for all of us. And to be vulnerable is not easy. To be humble is not easy. To be sacrificial is not easy. It's easy to be self-serving rather than other-oriented. Someone just randomly shared a thought with me this week, and it struck me. It related to to these Gospels. And they said the amount they lived in service to others is the measure of one's greatness. The amount that they lived in service to others is the measure of one's greatness. That being hard-hearted, being self-centered, is mediocre. And mediocrity is not greatness. And God created us for greatness and with purpose, to be alive. So on the other side of the coin of greatness and purpose, St. John Paul II had this to say: without a sincere gift of himself, man remains incomprehensible to himself. That we're created for sincere gift of self in body and in soul. That's what we hear in the Genesis reading, as they have this image of the rib being taken from the man and built into a woman. That even from the beginning, there's this need for sacrifice and gift in order to have and know life. I think this is what it means to have an existence with purpose. This is the ideal to which God has called all of us. And this is the ideal to which we cannot back down from. So, in what ways, are we called to live this sacrificial gift of self? Where can we see this? Well, in the vocations, that we're called to: marriage, priesthood, religious life, committed single life. And not just in the idea of these ways of self-gift, but in the reality. Because it's easy to be in a vocation and to continue to live for the self. Couples know this, like marriage is not a piece of cake. It takes a lot of balancing, a lot of communication, a lot of compromise. That at different times, there are many personal wants and desires that have to be abandoned. And after the wedding vows are said, it's easy to kind of want to try to take it back, over the course of the rest of life, to kind of live in the world of our own design. And I know this in priesthood, too. Certainly, my life is given, but there are many times that, I want to say yes, but maybe not right now. Maybe at a later time, maybe under different circumstances. There are times that I want to put myself first in my own vocation. But we don't have to be living a vocation formally, to practice using these heart muscles. How and where do we put others first in our lives? Particularly people we disagree with or don't get along with. Do we strive to see the good in them? Do we strive to raise them up in prayer? Do we strive to speak charitably to and about them? And just because maybe we've failed at this ideal in the past, doesn't mean we have to abandon it. Doesn't mean we're going to fail necessarily in the future. It's in giving our little yeses to vulnerability, sacrifice, charity, grace that are essential for life within and without a vocation. And we can know in our culture that as our culture promotes kind of a radical individualism, as we could know by kind of the motto, do whatever makes you feel happy. The ideal can seem to be abandoned and thrown by the wayside at times. That there are alternative lifestyles that are not just considered, but glorified. The division and tribalism that is existing more and more in our relationships, not helped by social media, is really an area that's hardly being really addressed by anyone. Being a disciple of Jesus means being one who's not going to abandon the ideal. These ideals of vulnerability, sacrifice, and selfless love. So today, may we respond to Jesus' call, but we also invite him into our hearts so that he can fill us to fill the ideals he's laid out for us. May our question, be, how can I better love those who God has surrounded me with? Not letting the past dictate the future. Because we are God's chosen people. We are loved by him, whether we're perfect or not. And he wants to supply us the grace that we receive in the Eucharist at this Mass. He wants to supply us the grace we need to live the ideal, to give our lives over in love, as he first did for us.